Alright guys, well, it is the next day. It's probably about noon. I have my root canal on the bottom tooth. I already did the top one. Remember, I've been waiting, a month. And lately it's been hurting a lot. Yesterday was pretty depressing for me because of Paul's anniversary of his death or whatever. I'm still feeling a little down about it. But I did get a couple of three things done last night. And maybe I was trying to upload too much shit at once, but what did I put up this morning? Oh yeah, the raw footage. So with that, I've decided to put all the raw footage on Patreon. I know I did some a while ago, probably, I don't know, 3 months ago, and I think it might have been on the upper tiers. I don't really remember, but I have like 9 of them, and since the documentary is getting closer to coming out, I kind of want Patreon to function as the supplementary material, so you guys get to see that early. So that's just like the raw, unabridged version of that particular stuff. So if I've already uploaded that, I know I didn't upload it to all tiers, and I have, like I said, 9 more. I need to go back and I need to look at what raw footage I've already uploaded, but I did do that. I got a juvenile delinquency and I got a Wasco story done last night. So I wanted to kind of get ahead of the curve so that there's not going to be days where you guys won't have content, and you guys have been asking for juvenile delinquency and Wasco stuff and to finish those storylines. So I figured that I just spent some time last night doing that, and like I said, I also got the raw one. Trying not to do too much on the recap side, and I'm trying not to be repetitive on storylines. And for somebody that's spent pretty much my entire fucking life doing hard drugs, at least 20 years of it, which is more than half my life. I'm 35, and I really got into, just trying to destroy my brain when I was 15. So, excuse me if my memory, I think all things considering that I still have a pretty good memory track for being such a fucking crackhead. Maybe sometimes I mess up the chronology and stuff, but I do remember things. And like when I'm hanging out with people from those particular time periods and they watch, they're on Patreon and stuff, they're always amazed that I can remember so much of that stuff. Like, I'll remind them, they'll be like, oh fuck, I remember when all that was happening. So I do have to compliment myself. I'm good at something, remembering what a piece of shit I was for a long time. But anyway, okay, so we're off the eve of Paul's anniversary, and it was just a shitty day, pretty much. But I did get more work done than I've done in a while. So since I have my root canal, and because I have to go back to Sinister's, I wanted to I literally just got out of bed, firefighter style. I didn't brush my teeth. I beat off. Went in the bathroom. I was like, my stomach hurts. And then I beat off. But I didn't brush my teeth. I just wanted, like, the video to be more authentic. But my tooth is really starting to hurt. I've been out of antibiotics for a while. It's starting to hurt again. But today's the root canal, so all that's going to be behind me anyway. I do that at 5 o'clock, which is a weird-ass time for a root canal. But anyway, all right, so let's get into the next part of the Redux story. Because, like I said, originally, and I don't go back and watch my old material from, 9 months ago. I don't even remember when I had originally done the How I Made $500,000 series, but I do know that there's a lot of elements that maybe I just kind of skipped over or went over in a cursory way. So that's kind of the point of this storyline. And I have to have one completely accessible one. Juvenile delinquency is going to go in the $20 tier, or Wasco is going to go in the $20 tier, juvenile on the $10, and then this is like our main storyline for this month. So that's the reason that I'm recording this now. So where we had left off last time, without going too far into it, I do hear some people defend me though. They're like, dude, his memory sucks, this bitch, let him let him recap stuff. It's how he remembers things. It's true. It's part of how you try remembering where you started, where you stopped. And when I've tried to jump into stuff cold, and then I just start telling just crazy random shit that nobody cares about. So I try to like figure out exactly where I was. And if I recall, the last video that we had done on this series was about that guy, Steve, who was the competition that I had in Santa Barbara at that time. And so, you know, what had happened, God, here comes the recap, but whatever. It's like I said, you know why I do this. It's not to take up time. It really doesn't matter. I could do 30-minute videos of all new stuff, but I'd have to just like jump in cold. And, you know, somebody did know you can fast forward. Maybe I should start keeping timestamps. But what had happened back in that time period is the way that heroin works in California, for the most part, it just really depends. It's like anywhere. You know, when I was on the East Coast, they sold bags, is what they called. And they were like these little teeny envelopes. You know, these little, like, I don't know, maybe like this is what one looked like. That was like a bag, and it would be flat like that, and it would have a stamp on it that would indicate what kind of brand name it was. So they did the same thing with ecstasy. You know, sometimes you'll have a Blue Dolphin, sometimes you'll have a Motorola sign, sometimes you'll have a dick. I've partied with gay guys, and they're like, do you want any dicks? And I was like, they're like, dick ecstasy. And then it's just like this little shape of like a moon crescent dick. And I'm like, fuck. So I would get you loaded. I'm down. And then I take it. And then, yeah, that's what I do. Because I'm a stupid California liberal. No, I'm not. Sorry. No politics. Heroin's similar. It makes sense from a business standpoint that there would be some brand recognizability because, especially with something like heroin, where quality fluctuates so much. Nowadays, it's a little different because there's so much fentanyl going around. And like I've mentioned a million times, it's not the kind of fentanyl, you know, when I was growing up, it was fentanyl lollipops, fentanyl patches that you'd put on yourself, transdermal patches or the other kind of patches. The stuff that they're putting out right now that's killing everybody is research chemical fentanyl, which is basically like some Chinese guy. I always picture the guy from Gremlins that works in the little shop that sold Gizmo. I always feel like that's the kind of motherfucker that's in some lab making fentanyl. They make this super concentrated, I don't know, synthetic fentanyl, also known as a research chemical, or if you're really hip on like dark web lingo, they call them the RCs. It's clever. They acronymize it. But because of fentanyl, because you only need a few granules to even feel, heroin quality tends to be pretty even these days. You know, it's, I don't know, you pretty much pay $20 and you're not going to be surprised because it's going to be bunk. It's generally the same quality, at least in Los Angeles. I haven't done heroin in major cities for a long time, but that's how it is here. Back in this time period, the time that Redux series takes place, it was like 2007, 2008. I need water. I've been nauseous for the last week. Maybe a little more than that. I had like a stomach virus and I don't know what's going on with me. I told Karina, I said, do you think it's mold infestation? And she's like, it wouldn't surprise me. This is a dirtbag place. So maybe that is what it is because we both feel sick and we don't know what. Constant nausea. That's my only symptom besides being a bitch. Back in 2007, 2008, when the story took place, the way that heroin was sold and distributed was people would get these big globs of black tar. So, a piece of heroin's 25 grams, right? It's about this big. It's a big black ball of gooey stuff. I love black balls. And what people do when they sell it is they'll get like a knife or something and they'll take off a chunk of the black tar goo, put it in a baggie, and that's how they sell it. You know, that's when I started doing heroin in California. That's how black tar came. You know, it'd just be like a little chunk of black tar, be in a little bag tied up. Maybe sometimes it'd be in a gram bag, although that was never preferable because it would like melt and kind of get stuck in the little, do I have a gram bag? No, you don't. It would get stuck in like the little Ziploc lips of it or whatever. So people generally just put it in like a little piece of plastic. So that's how heroin was on the market for a very long time when I first started doing it. And what had happened is when I started going down to LA and getting those balloons, that became the most efficient way to buy and sell heroin in Santa Barbara at that time. That was in 2007. Because you go down to downtown LA, and it's changed dramatically over the years. Back in 2007, they had these multicolored balloons. You've seen me post pictures of the evidence various times on Patreon. And, you know, they looked like Skittles. They were like yellow, blue, green, red, purple balloons. Each one of them had about a 0.1 in it. And that stuff was mixed with lactose, which is powdered milk. And it would be like the black tar heroin that I was talking about, the gooey stuff. They'd put it in the coffee grinder, put it with the lactose, and all of a sudden it would be brown powder. In the video that I posted this morning, the raw footage from, I guess we call it the Gabriel footage. It's called Master Clip 1 through 9. You can look at that heroin and it has a very strange color to it. It almost looks like light wood, bargain bin peckerwood. No, like a light piece of wood, like furniture wood. That's what it looks like. For some reason, that's the texture that it had, and that's the coloring that it had. And that's the lactose being mixed with the tar and drying that way. Those multicolored balloons back in that time, you go to downtown LA, you could get 24 of them for $100. And then I could take those balloons back to Santa Barbara and I could sell them literally for $50 or $60. And we've talked about that. Why is that? That is because back in that time period, Oxycontins was an epidemic. And that's why a lot of people you see in newspapers and you see political pundits and weird propaganda, you know, enslaved TV personalities talking about how big pharma is responsible for the opioid epidemic right now, because it's true. Because you don't look at a little green 80 milligram Oxycontin pill and think that you're slamming heroin, even though you're like shooting it. No, people would snort it, people would smoke it, people would take it. And you get just as strung out, if not more. I've always found in my experience with drugs that the synthetics get you more strung out than regular opiates. I don't know why. I think that it's just the way that it was synthesized. It tends to take longer to kick that stuff. Whatever the case, Oxycontin was a very, very ugly addiction. In Santa Barbara, being the rich town that it is, kids coming there and going to the community college, going to UCSB, kids that grew up there that just have like living trust and just want to spend every fucking cent of it on drugs and hookers. It creates a very, I guess, lucrative market for people that are selling drugs. And before I came around, people were buying black tar heroin in the little bags, just little chunks of black tar in a bag. Now that looks ominous to somebody that doesn't do heroin. They're like, ew, it's a black glob. That's fucking disgusting. You bring these multicolored balloons to Santa Barbara, and all of a sudden it kind of looks fun again. It's rainbow fucking scheme. It's like, dude, you can collect them all. It's like commemorative fucking heroin. Like, dude, I got this purple one in October, you know, and people, I don't know, there's this big thing with addicts that I've always seen is that people justify shit in their mind. And if they can make themselves, you know, believe in their mind that they're not doing something, is because who wants to say that they're doing heroin? That sounds horrible. You know, so people would actually say stuff like, I swear, I'm not even making, this is completely true. Yeah, I'm addicted to balloons. That's what they would say. I'm addicted to fucking balloons, as if there's not heroin within those balloons. But that's what these college kids would start saying. And what happened is I invented this entire market in Santa Barbara, because now people that were usually paying $60, $70, $80 for an Oxycontin pill were paying $50 for a balloon, and now they're addicted to balloons. I'm Ryan. I'm a balloon addict, you know, and this would be the way that they'd minimize this shit in their mind. Okay, so with all that being said, I became really the king of heroin in Santa Barbara at that time. Not something I'm proud of. At the time, I was really, really sick with addiction. You know, that's the bottom line. I was sick. I was a sick person. Wasn't doing it to make money. I was doing it because I had to fuel my own addiction. I was doing 11 fucking grams a day at that point. There was other competition, but other competition sold the goo in the bags, and people didn't want that. Like, ew, I don't do that. I do balloons, you know, because it just sounds better, right? So what happens is people like Steve, the guy that owned that pizza shop, that had done time with Scott, the guy that I had pulled the fake gun out. And I think he had a fake gun too, because had one in his lap, and he never, I mean, you would think, and he knew that I didn't have a real gun either. So I always assumed that he was going to go just grab one in his car, because I know he did have them. But that's how bitch-made people in Santa Barbara are. And I'm not saying it makes you tough to have a gun, but I'm saying that people do shenanigans like that. You know, they do a lot of fake stuff. I'm addicted to balloons. I shoot fools with airsoft guns, you know, stuff like that. So when I meet Steve, a lot of people started copying me, and he was one of those people. He would take globs of heroin and put it in these little aluminum foil balls. I'm addicted to aluminum balls, you know, and it didn't work. It wasn't as cool as being addicted to balloons. Now you're addicted to aluminum balls? I mean, I get it, but not everybody did, you know, not all college kids were receptive to this obvious copy of my balloon hustle. So when he comes and he meets me that time, I go and I meet him at his pizza shop. And this guy had a pretty big, prosperous hustle going in Santa Barbara. He co-owned the biggest medical marijuana dispensary. And then he owned a pizza shop. He was laundering money through the pizza shop from his medical marijuana and from selling heroin. And then he had this underage girl that was addicted to PCP, and she was like his sex slave, and it was just a really tacky situation. He comes and meets me, and he basically tells me that people were trying to rob me, that Scott was in county jail, and he was running his mouth about me, saying he beat me up, and telling people how much money I have. Just going around in county jail, probably talking to like homeless guys. He's like, hey man, you're homeless? I know this guy Ryan Leone, he fucking sells drugs. If we rob him, you won't be homeless anymore. So you have like all these like bearded dudes without teeth, like, yeah, fuck that fool. So there's like no, it was 3 guys, you know, it was this group of people that were planning on robbing me. Now this is the thing, and we had talked about this, and now this leads us into where we're at now in the current state of this story. I had started getting really paranoid. You know, my life, just because I haven't talked about that whole situation with Sass for a while, doesn't mean that went away. I owed the guy a fuckload of money. So basically, not only was I selling drugs for him, he literally owned me. You know, if he like made me start going on yachts and sucking off business dudes to kind of chip away at the debt, I would have been like, oh man, all right, fine. You know, and I would have probably done it. Probably would have never gone to prison. I'd just be some gay junkie slut, just sucking fools off on yachts. But I was indebted to him. There were constantly people coming over to my house and ODing, ice cubes going up people's asses. There's a lot of traffic there. And I smoked a lot of crack when I lived there. So I spent a lot of time looking out the window. Like, if you drove by, and this was, like, kind of in a commercial area in Santa Barbara, you would just see me, like, peeking out the blinds all the time. And then Jeff's head would, like, pop up, like, above me. We just looked like these crackhead owls that lived in this, like, complete trap house. So eventually we decided to move, and we ended up getting that place in Hidden Valley, which is in the outskirts of this town called, or this like really rich area in Santa Barbara called Hope Branch. I mean, $50 million homes. And then there was like this little suburban area, and that's where I was living at the time. Now that was my favorite place I've ever lived. It was a 2-bedroom condo, but it was just luxury. You know, there's a guest house, a condo at a guest house. Just imagine that. And at that time period, I had gotten on methadone already. And that was a period that I had started getting really antisocial. I was doing methadone, and that girl, Jade, that I'd been cheating on Jenny with, I don't know what had happened between her and I. I talked to her today, by the way. But I don't remember what had happened to her at that time. We had a falling out to some degree. She knew that she was my side girlfriend, and I can't remember why, but for some reason we had a falling out. So anyway, it didn't matter because now I was on methadone. I was gaining a lot of weight. Jeff and I had had our falling out by this point. Jeff never saw my second house. And you guys remember the story with Jeff. That's when I put the gun in his mouth and he was like crying. It was really, really evil of me, but I don't know, he stole weed from my epileptic girlfriend that needed it. So now I'm living at this house in Hidden Valley, and nobody knows where we live. That was an interesting time period as well, because since I became antisocial, because I didn't leave the house, because I didn't have sex, all I did all day was buy expensive stuff and sit at home getting fat, and we watched Lost. And that was it. That was my life. We owned some ATVs, some Sea-Doos, working for SAS periodically. And at that point, I was selling much less Molly and focusing more on the heroin. And I had 3 runners. I had 3 guys that worked for me. One of the guys' name was Ryder. One of the guys' name was Alex. One of the guys' name was Lou. Those were their... I don't think that Ryder was the real name, but Alex was and Lou was. Those were both real names. I don't know what Ryder's name was. Maybe it was Ryder. I think it was, actually. And basically all I had to do, and we've talked about this time period, and we're getting to what the point of the story is in a second, but all I had to do was stay at home. The runner down in LA, Diana Ortiz's runner, would drive up there. They would have, they'd go down to Mexico and they would get their calls altered. So the engine block of their car was hollowed out and you could hide your drugs in there. And it was insulated. It had like foam padding. And basically they'd come to my house and they'd switch cars in the garage, and they would do that on like Monday and Friday. So I got 2 deliveries a week. I was getting about £1 each time, selling heroin, buying expensive, meaningless shit. I had like devices that supposedly could like tell if somebody was wearing a wire. It would start beeping. It would go like beep, 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 beep. Like, shit like that. I started buying a lot of action figures. That's during the time period that I started collecting a lot more art. And basically my life didn't have a lot of drama. I was still indebted to SAS. I wasn't getting the same kind of deals that I was getting from him before. And at this point, he wasn't making me go do as many of those high-risk deals that we had talked about. Now, there came a point where my friend Kevin, the guy that I just saw recently, the guy that I had been partnered up with pretty much in the beginning of my drug dealing career with his girlfriend, he'd gotten really bad into heroin. And I'd watched that happen to quite a few people in this scene. Happy, the glass blower, when I met him, he was kind of dabbling in heroin, and like by the end, he was like a full-blown junkie. Like his teeth had gone black. He was like missing a couple teeth, and like, you got to understand, like, he did not look like that in the beginning, and it just slowly started going downhill like that for him. Where, like, he'd be like, hey, man, you think you can do 3 balloons? I'd be like, yeah, I'll be right there. And, like, I'd go, and, like, every time I'd see him, he's, like, missing a different tooth, or he just looks worse than the time before. And I started seeing that was happening all around me. I basically went in and turned, like, a very heady festival type crowd into junkies, you know, because they knew that I sold heroin, and we'd be partying and they'd ask me for a balloon and they were smoking it. To people like that, I think they underestimated what heroin was. I think they looked at it just like any other drug that they were fucking with. And I slowly started watching the scene go to shit. Now, Kevin, when Sass had took me on, you know, to replace Damon, he had also picked Kevin, you know, and I had talked about this. The reason being was that I was a Santa Barbara local. Kevin was a college kid. So by employing both of us, he was literally dominating the drug market in Santa Barbara because he had representatives for both the locals and the college kids. And Kevin was really responsible. He's like one of the most responsible guys that I'd ever met, you know. It was like annoying. Like, he didn't even shoot up heroin, and he'd always have like, he'd be like, "Hey guys, I brought some antibiotic ointment. It's in my fanny pack. I also have some bleach for your rigs." I'm like, "Yeah, you don't do that unless you're sharing rigs with people." He's like, "I don't know. I've read all about blood infections." And so he was always like really strange about shit like that. He started smoking heroin. And after he started smoking it for long enough, I remember going over one day and he was injecting it. And I was like, Jesus. I was like, "Do you want some antibiotic ointment?" He's like possessed. He looked like he was like in The Exorcist. He's like, "I don't give a fuck." It's like spitting venom. I'm like, Jesus, dude. You all right? So he became completely sketchy. I mean, that's what heroin does to you. It turns the most solid stand-up people into complete sketchballs. And he became scandalous as a result. Now, he had always had animosity towards Sass at this point. Now, one of the reasons being is that we heard, and I know I brought this up before, but this is the time period where we got it confirmed that he had date raped a girl that we knew. Brought some girl back to his house, told her that he was giving her Molly. She fucking woke up in the middle of the night with him on top of her. And this guy was ugly. You know, I mean, I don't fuck guys, but like, if I had to fuck a guy, he wouldn't even be on the radar. No, not even for 40 or 50 bucks. Gross. I was like, "Oh, I don't do shit like that." But then like, some hot tan guys like, "Dude, I got 18 bucks. I'm like, "Yeah, do shit like this all the time, bro." The girl that he had raped was a girl that I went to high school with. I'd been friends with her for a long time. And we heard rape rumors before that, but this is when it was really like, we started believing it. And of course, I had animosity towards the guy because I basically was being extorted to sell drugs for him for just ridiculous rates. You know, back in that time period, I was supposed to get keys of Molly for $15,000 by themselves. A single key was supposed to be $15,000, but because I owed him so much money, now he's giving them to me for $28,000. And he was knocking off the additional $13,000 as part of our debt. So when I found out that he had raped this girl that I knew, her name was Julia, you know, I kind of just took that as an excuse to, well, fuck that guy. You know, I already felt that way anyway because I was mad at myself for that whole situation. When all in all, he was just trying to help me. It's not my fault that my friend Leon had like some sketchy, you know, methed out biker guys come from Ohio, try to buy shitty weed from me and end up stealing almost $400,000 from Sass. So the whole thing kind of had left a bad taste in my mouth. And we knew that Sass had another connection. We knew that he wasn't the top dog. There was somebody above him. You know, and it was kind of like in the beginning when I had met Damon. Guy wore Speedos. He wore tanning oil. It's ridiculous. He was like a character out of like an 80s like Quaalude cocaine movie or something. And I'd always be bringing him to deliver money to Wells Fargo. He'd always be doing money drops. Sometimes he'd have me go in there because they had regulations about how much money you could wire people or put in other people's accounts. So we were doing that all the time. And because of that, I realized that there was somebody above him, and it was always my goal to systematically X Damon out of the equation and go right to the source, which the highest at that point that we knew about was Sass. We didn't know him by name, and then we had met him at that Halloween party. So by the time that I met him, the whole plan was to get rid of Damon to begin with. Damon had become pretty unreliable. I mean, he was just a party guy. And I talked to Kevin about it recently, and it sounds like Damon came from somewhere on the East Coast, and he was like really rich. Like, he's like, yeah, man. He's like, showed me like home, photos of them, and they're wearing like, private school Letterman jackets and shit. That's like what their family photos look like for Christmas, It was like the MacArthurs, it was like really like proper stuff like that. So we knew that he was kind of just a rich kid that had gone awry at some point, or astray. And he got X'd out of the picture pretty quickly. And at a certain point, Kevin had told me that he had talked to Damon, and Damon was homeless now, and he was like a born-again Christian, and he was cursing me and basically blaming me for losing his lifestyle, because once Sass met me and Kevin, he had cut Damon off completely. Now, he never blamed Kevin for that. He always blamed me. I think I was just more blamable, just because if I had like buck teeth and acne, like, yeah, that guy did it, not Kevin. He was like the responsible of the group. So once things started going south with Sass during this time period, we had wanted to X him out of the equation. Now, there was a couple times that I can remember where we had talked to his connection on the phone. His connection would be yelling at him, because his connection ran this thing like it was like a real business. Like, he had books, he logged how much money he was bringing in, how much money he had out. I mean, he would literally do like presentations on the phone that was like a quarterly report for a business. He'd be like, hey, we're underperforming by like over 400 fucking grand right now on the second quarter. He's like, and he would say stuff like this: I give you the best drugs in the fucking world. They should sell themselves. You're such a screw up, Sass. You're such a screw up that you can't even get that right because you employ fucking morons. And I'd just be like eating like beer nuts in the corner. I'd be like, oh yeah, that guy sounds like a dick, man. And so I that's the only exposure that we had to him. We'd heard rumors around the campfire about who this guy was and where he came from. Now, the story that we had heard was that he was from he was from Toronto. That's really all that we knew, and that he had people that worked below him that worked in Oregon, but we didn't know much about him, and of course Sass knew better than to get us anywhere near this guy, because he knew that we were the kind of guys that would X him out of the equation, just like we had done to Damon. At a certain point in all of this, Kevin comes over. He's strung out. Now I'm his connection for where to get heroin. And honestly, I had gone from a point where I did sell smaller sacks of heroin to people, but usually it had to be people that I knew, like, on a personal basis. Like, that's why I was hanging out with Happy as much as I was, because, he was like a client of mine. But by the time we moved to the second house, the much more expensive house, it was a different era for us. I became a wholesale heroin dealer where I was just dealing with those three runners. But occasionally, I'd still deal with friends on like a smaller level, and Kevin was one of them. He comes over one day, and he tells me that he has the address of Sass's drug dealer, that he knows where it is and that it's in Eugene, Oregon. And he said that one of the girls that we had known, actually, if you guys remember in the What Really Happened series, Shamrock, the guy that had co-signed for Sass when Jenny had pistol whipped him right before I went to prison, and said that he would personally take responsibility for his debt. And then he went on to be like one of the biggest weed guys in Southern California. He's literally making millions a year right now, and I try to get the $70,000 from him. Kevin was good friends with his girlfriend, you know, and his girlfriend had the tendency to drink and spill the beans. Now, she actually knew Sass's connection. See, these guys, her, Shamrock, everybody else that had lived in that mansion with Sass in Santa Barbara, they were all renting rooms there. They all sold weed, you know, that was their thing. They sold pounds of weed, and they kind of looked at Sass as a liability because he sold harder drugs. Well, that, and he's going around date raping Santa Barbara locals, which to me is a liability. You know, you can only karmically get away with stuff like that for so long before people fuck you up. And I'm no stranger to being around rapists and pedophiles and getting my own kind of civil retribution on them and being a vigilante. It has happened multiple times, all the way from that guy Justin who looked at the kiddie porn, who Beast had hit with a brick in the juvenile delinquency series, all the way to Mike Virgin, running a pedophile brothel kiddie porn ring in Southern Florida. You know, I've been around pieces of shit like that, and even though my moral compass was skewed, you know, rape, child molester, shit like that, I mean, I could never be okay with stuff like that, you know, and in my mind, I was already really frustrated that I was indebted to Sass on the level that I was, but Kevin was always kind of the responsible one, like I said, but now that he was on heroin, he was falling apart. And I guess Shamrock's girlfriend had a big mouth when she drank. And she said that she knew where this guy lived. Now, his name was Primo, you know, and Primo was like the big dog. He was the guy, literally, you know how in Blow, the movie Blow, they say that if you bought cocaine, you know, in the late 70s, early 80s, there was, I don't know, 2 in 3 chance that it came from them. This guy was so big in the ecstasy and LSD trade. Those were like his 2 primary chemicals that he sold. There's probably a 3 in 3 chance that if you were doing those kind of drugs in 2007, 2008, doesn't matter where, he was dealing with people in like over 14 countries, according to Shamrock's girlfriend. This is what Kevin was telling me. And he had every single state completely sewn up. He had people like Kevin and I in every single state working for him. So this is the first time that we kind of started getting a clear picture of how Sass's operation worked. And he was able to get Primo's address. And Kevin said that, you know, now he was injecting heroin. Now his life was completely going away, you know, falling apart. He had fucked Amanda, who was Happy's girlfriend. So he was kind of vilified and ostracized in our scene, and he was getting cut off left and right from people because he became a heroin addict. I've been a heroin addict for so long that I'd like learned how to like disguise my piece of shitness, you know? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just eccentric. Oh, don't mind me. I'm just stealing money out of your pocketbook, you know? And people are like, oh, he's just funny. He's just a funny junkie guy. And people kind of like tended to excuse me for my bad behavior. Somebody like Kevin, who was a very responsible guy, he didn't get excused for behavior like that as easily because people looked at him as somebody that should know better. So he's getting cut off left and right. His business is falling apart. His girlfriend, Erica, had left him. The scene that we were in at those pool parties at Happy's house, they had essentially ostracized him as well because, you know, he fucked like the queen of the castle, and everybody loved the king, and he fucked her on ecstasy, which is MDMA, massages, we had sex, weird, pretty predictable shit. So he comes to me saying that Shamrock's girlfriend had given him Primo's address, and that Primo was the big dog. He was a Canadian dude, but he was living in Eugene. And Kevin said, we got to cut Sass out. That's what we got to do. We got to get in the car, me and you, and we got to drive to Eugene, and we need to go tell Primo that Sass is a goddamn rapist. Can I have a shot, bro? You know, and so it was like hard to take the guy seriously because he was strung out. To me, it sounded like he wanted to rob the guy. That's what it sounded like to me. I mean, that was like my first instinct on it. So this is going on. He's trying to convince me. Came over. We had a long conversation. And he's like literally showing me. He's like, look. Shows me like a napkin that's like in a sandwich bag. He's like, I got the address. I didn't even know. I was like, what address? It's Primo's address. I'm like, who's Primo? He's like, Sass's boss. I'm like, okay, what are we going to knock on the door and be like, hey, we work for Sass, but now we want to work for you. He's like, no. He's like, we have a moral obligation to go to Eugene and we got to tell him that Sass is a rapist. That doesn't make sense to you? Now, I had stopped smoking crack at this point, so it didn't make sense to me. I just wanted to eat, take methadone, not have sex, and watch Lost. That's it. Call me old-fashioned, but it's the kind of shit that I was into at that point. But this is something that he was really like, and he was telling me that. He's like, you can sell ice to a fucking Eskimo. I need you, man. If we can cut Sass out, think about it. You won't have to pay off that stupid debt with him anymore. And, we'll be on top again, because at this point we'd already started losing steam and clout. I mean, that's just the simple fact of the matter. I had turned into a completely obese junkie. I had a treadmill too, and I'd like walk laps on it. I'd be like smoking Marlboro Reds, like walking laps on this treadmill and just like dying, like dry heaving because I couldn't take the physical exertion of it. And my life was kind of in shambles myself. I'd just been having this affair. I felt bad about it. Now I was asexual again because I was on methadone. Felt like somebody had put like a cork from a wine bottle in my cock. It just didn't feel like, I don't even think it moved anymore. I think like if I touched my balls, it hurt. Which is it's not supposed to happen. So that's going on. He's really like trying to convince me that we need to go to Eugene and we need to go like tell this guy that Sass is a rapist so that somehow we can get him as a connection. We can get back on top of the world. The same time period, Steve, this new heroin dealer, who I didn't even realize was as big a piece of shit as he ended up being. I mean, I had heard rumors that he had a 17-year-old sex slave that he was telling her that he was giving her DMT, but he was really giving her PCP, and that he basically ran trains on her with his friends. And that he liked that. He was a cuckold. Just gross, but I don't know. That floats some people's boats. Some people are fucking weird. Yeah, there's some perverted ass fucks out there. I just talked to my friend the other day, this girl, and she's like, my husband, I went on his phone and he had pictures of trannies in camo. And I was like, that's fucking tight. I get it. She's like, what do you think that means? I'm like, well, probably means he likes trannies. Does he do meth? She's like, no. I'm like, that definitely means he likes trannies, then that's not normal. Nothing wrong with that. That's cool. That's a fetish for people. I get it. And she's like, do you think he wants me to stick stuff up his ass? I was like, probably. I don't know. Ask him. And I guess she called him out on it. And she's like, I found camo tranny porn. And he's like, so? Why are you being a lurk? Why are you looking through my phone? That's your response, dude? Why don't you just if I got caught with camo tranny porn, I'd be like, yeah. Fucking so what? I like camouflage shit. I don't care that it has a dick. Who cares? Stop being judgmental. It's 2020. Closed-minded fuck. That's what I would have said. But anyway. So this same time that Kevin is really like kind of espousing, the same time that he's pushing this agenda of going out to Eugene to go meet Primo or whatever, Steve is telling me that this guy is moving in on me. This guy, Scott. That I guess now he has the backing of a bunch of dirtbags that he had met in jail. And they know where my new house is. Now, nobody knew where my new house is. At least I thought. Even Steve, he'd been there. But when I brought him over there, I'd put a t-shirt around his eyes so that he didn't know where I was. So at that time, I think I've talked about this before. I'd gotten on eBay and I had bought in a drug dealer safe. I literally went on eBay and I was like, drug dealer safe. And one came up. It's like, drug dealer safe. I was like, that's a pretty good drug dealer safe. I want it. And it was like a fake table that you could open and it had a safe. Now, I've always been one of those guys where I'm not very smart with shit like this. I will try to I'm a show off, right? If I have shit like that, like Steve came over to my house, even though we put a blindfold on him, comes over to my house and I was like, dude, check out my drug dealer safe that I got from eBay. You know, I don't remember how much it was, but I think I've explained it before. I wish I had pictures of it. It was like this table that you like press a button and you could like move the table and there was a safe and there was like all these fake like shelves with like VHS tapes and you could hide drugs and money in there. It was badass. And it was really hard to figure out that this table was actually a safe. So I was showing it to him. And at the time I had, God, I don't know, probably 200,000, maybe 150,000 in the safe. And I had a bunch of pounds of heroin, I had guns, I had all this shit in the safe. And Steve was at my house one time and I showed it to him. Now, as he's at my house, he's telling me that Scott figured out where I live, even though this guy Steve didn't even know where I lived at that time. You know, he was just over there. And that him and his friends were trying to rob me, and that if I would be willing to introduce my connection down in LA for the balloons to him, that he would stop the robbery and that could be a counter rob, that we'd rob them, even though these guys were complete bums and they had nothing to offer. So that made no sense to me. See, in my mind, this guy Steve was just trying to come up on my connection, and I was like, I was not going for it. But nonetheless, I hung out with him. I'm not sure why. And when he was at my house, I showed him all the shit that I had. So Jenny and I end up going to, I think, Lollapalooza. Or was it Bonnaroo? I don't know. One of these festivals. I think it was Lollapalooza. It was in Illinois. I'm almost positive it was Lollapalooza. I think so, because we saw Jane's Addiction there, and that's their thing. But anyway, we ended up going to this festival while this other stuff is going on. So we got Kevin wanting to rob Sass. We got me being indebted to Sass, and getting ripped off on any of the Molly deals that we were doing because I owed him all this money. And then we had Steve trying to like get in on my connection, and Kevin wanting to go to Eugene to tell Primo that Sass was a rapist so that we could steal the connection from him and be back on top of the world. So we end up going to this festival, and one thing that had happened is I took mushrooms while I was there. I'd taken mushrooms 1 million times. Not 1 million, but probably like 978,000 or something. Now, probably at that point, I was 22 years old. I'd probably done mushrooms, just to give you a realistic understanding of like how much I did stuff like that. Probably tripped on mushrooms like 200 or 300 times at that point, which is quite a bit, I think. And sometimes they would make me nauseous, but not always, you know. I don't know. I always had pretty good experiences in the beginning with mushrooms. At the end, they would make me really emotional, and I started really not liking mushrooms, and I don't really like them as much as I used to now. Like, they make me just way too emotional, you know, about shit that I'm like, I'm adopted, and people are like, no, you're not, you look just like your dad. I'm like, oh. Yeah, I know, but I'm sad for people that are. No, I'm not. I think adoption, if I could adopt, I would. I'm sorry. Adoption humor is whack. Okay, anyway. When we go to Lollapalooza, which I'm pretty sure that's what we went, I ended up eating mushrooms. They made me violently ill. I don't know if somebody said that there was some sort of mold on them, and that's what had made me sick like that. But I ate these mushrooms, and I started, like, not to get too graphic, but I was literally shitting blood that looked like Hershey syrup. Like, it was like thick black, like Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho colored blood. Just seeping out of my asshole like the end of like a coffee pot or something. And this is while we were at this festival. And of course they only have, you know, porta potties or whatever. So I'm like, you know, when you're like so sick, and I know, come on, I know this is graphic, but I know that some of you have been there. You know how you're so sick, like just this explosive syrupy diarrhea all over the toilet, and then like you get up and like droplets are everywhere, and I was just like, oh, and it was like all over my ass. I remember it being super embarrassing because I was wearing pajama bottoms. I was wearing like these plaid pajama bottoms, and there was just this big ass pancake shit smear stain. And I couldn't stop throwing up, and I couldn't stop having diarrhea. I ended up having to go to the hospital in Illinois, and I had food poisoning from the mushrooms, from psychedelic mushrooms. And I guess that was like the most memorable thing that had happened. But I end up going back to Santa Barbara, and we get back to my house, and when we go to open the front door, we can already tell that somebody had broken in there. You know, it's like the kind of thing where we went to go put the key in, and just like a little pressure applied to the door, came right open. It kind of looked like that. That's from one time when Karina and I were fighting, and I like kicked the door. Kind of looked like that. So it was obvious that that our house had been broken into, that somebody had fucked with the lock. Now, we had, like I said, we probably had, I don't know, 150,000, something like that, in the safe. So, of course, my immediate thought is that somebody had gone in there and taken that. I go in, pretty much everything in the house is gone. TVs are gone. We had an aquarium with like a piranha in it. That shit was gone. That really pissed me off, too. I was like, what the fuck? Who takes a piranha? A piece of shit. And I go into the room with the safe, and it's still there. The table thing's still there, not tampered with. Leads me to believe, because now I'm trying to come up with the suspect pool, and not very many people knew where I lived. Only a few people. But I had people like Kevin, who I'd been working with for a long time, who had started shooting heroin, who had gotten very untrustworthy, you know? And now, yeah, Steve this whole time had been saying that Scott and like some like homeless thugs is how he described them. I don't even know what the fuck that means. People with like American flag bandanas. They're like, yeah, man, I'm a hobo thug. So what? I didn't know who had stolen from us, but somebody had pretty much gone into my place and taken nearly everything that I have except for the most important thing, which was the drugs, guns, and money. So, but my TVs were gone, my aquarium was gone. They had even taken a Sea-Doo. So, had to have been quite the heist. Now, this was a duplex condo, so I went and I asked my neighbor if they had seen anything, and they did say that somebody had come with a U-Haul and basically cleared my shit out. So it had to have been an inside job. I didn't think that at that time that it was Scott and his people, because I legitimately didn't think they knew where I lived. The only people that knew where I lived were my friends. Even that guy Steve didn't know where I lived. That's the only person that I feel like would talk to him. Now, Kevin did know Scott, so it was possible that it was some sort of like orchestrated job between Kevin and Scott, and that he had told them where I was. But the point is we were really upset, obviously. I mean, somebody had come into our place, rented a U-Haul, had to have been somebody we knew, and probably taken, I don't know, $60,000, $70,000 worth of shit, including the Sea-Doo. So now I was in just a horrible mood, and I felt unsafe. The whole reason for moving into this nice place was so that we would be safe, because I thought that being at that old house would potentially get us in trouble with the law, and now something like this happened. So obviously somebody that had bad intentions for us had figured out where I was. And first thing I did was call Steve, and, you know, I basically explained, I was like, hey man, I got fucking robbed. What's up? He's like, oh my God, it was probably Scott. I'm like, how would he know where I live though? It didn't make any sense, you know? Like I said, I knew a few people that knew him. Nobody that would tell him that though, or at least that's what I thought at that time. So it was like this big mystery to me, and we were really upset about it. We felt unsafe. You know, we felt like they were probably pissed because they didn't get what they came looking for. And I felt like if Steve had anything to do with it, that safe would have been gone. Now, I don't think they could have gotten into that safe because it was a safe that you had to have a key to get inside. It was almost like it was like a really heavy duty key. It was like a car key. You know, it had like some crazy ass latch on it. But also, I thought that maybe because we had shown Steve what was inside the safe, that maybe, you know, he had intentionally not taken that to make it look like it wasn't him. Regardless, I was so upset, and I tend to do this when I'm mad, that I end up calling Kevin, and of course I'm accusing him, basically telling him that I thought that he stole from me. And he's like, dude, I would never do that to you. Come on, we're partners. Why the fuck would I steal TVs from you? He's like, I don't give a shit about that. I told him that the dope wasn't missing, that the money wasn't missing, but that pretty much, I don't know, 80% of our belongings, including Jenny's like underwear and stuff, but like they left mine, which offended me. I was like, fuck. And why wouldn't they take my boxers? So after having this like heated call with Kevin, I basically ended it saying that I wanted to go with him to Eugene. I wanted to go meet Primo. I wanted to go put Sass on blast, and I wanted to fucking jack his connection from him. So that pretty much leads us into the next part of the Redux story, which we'll call Redux Eugene, the time that I spent out there with the head honcho of the organization. I just wanted to get this one in because I already did those other 2 videos, and that way there doesn't have to be any days where I don't put up any content. Those ones for the upper tiers. Check out this painting that I did. Isn't that cool? I really like that. I sold it. But anyway, I appreciate each and every one of you guys. Palabra.